As James from Bolt Bros here, want to go over some potential defensive coordinators that could come to the Chargers next season and kind of connect it to some candidates that could be our next head coach for the Chargers. So let's go ahead and get into it, guys. Bolt Bros, let's go.
I'm Dale Henley. You watching the Bolt Bros podcast? Let's do it!
All right, guys, really appreciate the support and love and everything too. We are in the off season, so it's kind of an interesting thing to kind of see what potentially could be what 2024 Chargers look like. There's a lot still going on, a lot of rumors, a lot of interviews going on right now. For the most part, this is a little bit more speculations, but possibly putting a little pieces together for the puzzle that can construct the 2024 Chargers. So once again, guys, like this video, subscribe to the channel. We always appreciate the support. So let's kind of jump into some of the guys that I've kind of pinned that could be our defensive coordinator for next year. Some could be obvious. Some could be just, hey, we got a little history with them. So let's jump right into it, guys. So first guy I'm going to throw out there, Derek Ainsley. You got to throw him out there because the guy's been with the Chargers for some time. And, a lot of the players seem to really like playing with him. Big time. I mean, started with the Chargers 2021 and obviously up to the 2023 season. Started as a defensive back coach. A lot of players really loved him, respected him, and thought that he was a good, solid leader for them. And if you really look at it as when Brandon Staley ended up getting let go, the 3 games that he was the defensive coordinator was a totally different looking defense, a little bit more energetic, seemed like they played a lot better. They only gave up about 17 points per game. Now, albeit we did have kind of some backup situations against the Chiefs. But we played pretty well against the Bills. We played pretty well against the Broncos. It wasn't a bad showing at all. So what he showed in his 3-game stint as a defensive coordinator, he did a good job. Once again, 17 points on average is what they gave up as a defense. That'll put you in the top either 1 or 2 slot in comparison to other defenses in the NFL. And once again, the players want to respect their coordinators and their head coaches and coordinators and such. Players seem to really like to play for him. We even did an interview with Asante Samuel Jr., and he really talked pretty big about Derek Ainsley, and he really liked him as a coach. So once again, if you want to keep candidates in-house, that's the guy you want to start with as a defensive coordinator. We'll see where it's at. Now, once again, head coaches have different ideas, but sometimes ownerships want to be able to keep their guys in-house. Derek Ainsley did also get an interview for a defensive coordinator position for the New York Giants. So, hey, there is a lot of people that are looking at Derek Ainsley as a potential candidate as a defensive coordinator because he did a pretty good job with the Chargers for 3 games. So that's just one to throw out there. But moving on. So this guy right here, Patrick Graham, we did interview him for a head coaching job. I'm a big fan of his. He is from the New England Patriots lineage. He's been coaching since 2002, college level to New England Patriots since 2009, 10, 11, 12, up to, wow. I mean, it was a very long period of time that he was with the Patriots and the defensive line coach, linebacker coaches, defensive assistants, up to 2015, and then became a defensive line coach for the Giants, 2016, 2017, 2018 with the Packers, linebacker coach, run game coordinator, and then defensive coordinator for the Dolphins for 2019, and assistant head coach and defensive coordinator for the Giants, who did actually a pretty good job of shifting that team around quite a bit to become a very good, strong defensive team. And then even with the Raiders for the last 2 years, felt like he did a great job of making that team and getting the best out of what talent that they had on field. Max Crosby is an absolute force as a player and has done extremely well with the Raiders and played extremely well under Patrick Graham. Obviously the Chargers did have an interview with Patrick Graham as a head coach. Once again, some of these interviews are really designed not just for a head coaching, but to think, maybe this is a guy that we could bring in as a defensive coordinator, put it in assistant head coaching, tag also on his name, give him something else outside of just a defensive coordinator, but it's trying to find that next fit for, position coaches, basically. And I know in the past we've done that. We've done that with like Ron Rivera, where we interviewed him for a head coaching job. And we brought him in as a linebacker coach, eventually as a defensive coordinator years ago. So there is that thought that these interviews don't just mean a head coaching job. It could also mean position-based coaches. And I would like to be able to see Patrick Graham come in here. Now, once again, it's all contingent based upon whatever head coach comes in. You would assume at some point, if Bill Belichick does get an interview and says he's the head coach of the Chargers, Patrick Graham could be that guy that they try to pull away. Remember, Patrick Graham got hired by the Raiders because of McDaniels being over there, the Patriot connection, basically. So that's something that you kind of put the pieces to this whole puzzle about all these interviews. You try to find those guys that could fit well for that puzzle. So we'll see where that kind of leads. But Patrick Graham, I think, has done a great job as a defensive coordinator. Could definitely elevate this team quite a bit. Also give us maybe a leg up on the Raiders too. That would be kind of nice too. So moving on, this one's might not be the most popular choice, but GIF Smith. He's been with the Chargers for a while, and the Chargers seem very loyal to him. He's basically been a coach since '91. He was Arkansas, Georgia Southern, Tulane, Georgia Tech, Buffalo Bills as a defensive line coach in 2010. Stayed basically in the NFL since then. Went to the Titans from 2014 to 2015. San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers 2016 to basically current, and became the intern head coach and everything too. Players, once again, I felt like the players really liked playing for him. Khalil Mack even talked pretty heavily about GIF Smith keeping him as a head coach and keeping him there. Players don't have the choices to basically say who's going to be the guy that the owners want, but players respected him and really seemed to want to play for him quite a bit. And, it was kind of a bummer we weren't able to get him one win as an interim head coach, but I think he did a pretty good job with what he had. Now, once again, he got the short end of the stick, didn't have Justin Herbert, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, like a lot of players basically, but he did his best with what he had. And, that might be an interesting move for him to possibly take that leap as a defensive coordinator. Maybe I'm a little bit off on thinking GIF could be that guy, but he has been on the defensive side for such a long period of time. Once again, being a good coordinator is also being a leader and a guy that the players respect. And I think GIF is one of those guys that a lot of these players respect. Now, this all does mean that if GIF would come back, he might just come back as a defensive line coach, but it's really dependent on whatever the next head coach might be. GIF did interview as a head coach candidate for the Chargers as an internal candidate. So we'll see where he basically lands at this point. But hey, maybe we should just give him a shot with the defensive coordinator. I think that sounds a little iffy just to say, yeah, let's just give him a shot. But he's been around, some fair coaches and such that have done a pretty good job for defenses for this team. And, maybe at the same side, he even be able to be upgraded to just an assistant defensive coordinator too, and keep him at the outside linebacker coach position. There's been a lot of guys that have jumped from that position to great defensive coordinators, and GIF could be one of those guys. Maybe I'm just a little bit of stretch on that one. He could be a guy that you could look at and be relied on as a really good defensive coordinator. So moving on. So this one connects a lot to Jim Harbaugh, Jesse Minter. If you know much about him, and did you watch the college football playoffs and national championship game, this was the defensive coordinator for Michigan. Just an absolute stud. The way that defense was rocking and rolling, the way it was just throwing itself out there, highly aggressive as a team, very, very well coached defense. Just something the Chargers have lacked in a very, very long time, of just a defense that knows how to tackle, that knows how to be sound, quality-based football and hit people hard and just be in the right place, right time, and be very aggressive. That's one thing that Jesse Minter really brought to Michigan, and it was fun watching that defense play for Michigan. This guy, I think, needs to be the guy paired with Jim Harbaugh. And once again, you have the connection directly with him at Michigan and was basically the defensive coordinator for 2022, 2023. Also, on top of that, just to take a step further back in his history, He was also a part of the Baltimore Ravens from 2017 to 2020. So once again, he worked with John Harbaugh and then he moved over to Jim Harbaugh. There's always a lot of these, players, coaches whom not have come from, John Harbaugh's side of things at the Ravens and gone to Jim Harbaugh to be able to coach with him at Michigan. It makes sense to keep that continuity going and to be able to have Jesse Minter over with the Chargers. Think of how awesome this defense will be. It'll be such an elevated base defense, an aggressive defense, a defense that tackles and prioritizes on being aggressive and tackle correctly quite a bit. This guy would be phenomenal and a younger coach all around too. He's only 40 years old. I think he'd be a phenomenal hiring. And I've heard even rumors that Jim Harbaugh wants to have Jesse Minter come over with him from Michigan. So my hopes is that does happen. Minter also was the interim head coach during Jim Harbaugh's 3-game suspension to open the 2023 season, which he basically got 3 wins out of that. So I think it'd be a really, really great addition to have Jesse Minter come over with Jim Harbaugh. That's the connections that this one brings to the Chargers and who we would like to be able to see as a head coach. So Jesse Minter would be a phenomenal defensive coordinator for this team. Moving on, Leslie Frazier. We did interview him on Sunday. With Leslie, it's an interesting one because he's got a lot of head coaching experience in his past. Defensive coordinator, multiple years, defensive back coach. He's been through quite a bit with the NFL and a little bit within college. So 1988 is when he started his coaching career. He was also an interim head coach with the Vikings and then became the head coach for the Vikings. Didn't have the hugest success as a head coach, basically 21-32-1. Did get to the postseason once with 1 loss, career 21-33-1 as a head coach. But as a player, he did win a Super Bowl. And as a coach, he did win a Super Bowl. So he is one of those guys that has been at the highs of highs in the NFL. He is a guy that actually was a defensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills for 2017-2019, and then became an assistant head coach and defensive coordinator in 2020 to 2022 for the Buffalo Bills. The guy is a good player that has the ability to get the best out of players for the defense. Now, how I could connect this with any of the head coaches that we've interviewed, well, maybe he really truly is being viewed as a head coach. He did take a year off after 2022 and stepping away from the Buffalo Bills to become a head coach. He wants to be a head coach now. He is a free agent at this point, so they could easily interview him face-to-face at this point, or they could just do a Zoom, either which way. But he did get interviewed by the Chargers. He did basically get that look as a head coach. Now, I'm also putting this piece of the puzzle that it could be, well, maybe the head coaching position might not work for him, but maybe that year off, he just says, hey, look, like I'll take whatever job I could potentially get. And he might be able to be a great candidate to bring a good defense to our team. So, and possibly just tag him as an assistant head coach too. Now, I don't really know where he would fit within the head coaching candidates that we've thrown out there, but he's an experienced guy and an experienced head coach. He brings that leadership. Now, I was always concerned about Brandon Staley's staff. It was very young in general. You want to be able to have a guy that has been a head coach, a guy that has had a lot of experience, and to be able to be a guy that can lead a team and knows how to be able to coach a very solid defense. And the Buffalo Bills have always had pretty good defenses all around. So Leslie Frazier would be an awesome candidate, in my opinion, as a defensive coordinator for the Chargers and or whatever head coach, or as a head coach. I'm not 100% sure about that one, but either which way, that's one that I think could find a way as a defensive coordinator on the Chargers and do well. Moving on. So Don Martindale or Wink Martindale. This one is an interesting one. And, the big thing about him, he was a defensive coordinator for the Giants most recently. He basically cussed out Brian Dable over there because of all the firings that they had there for their defensive staff. He got really ticked off and he's like, I'm out of here, man. So he stepped away. The craziest part of Wink's connection with the head coaching candidates that we've had so far is this goes back far. So he actually coached for 3 seasons at Western Kentucky University on the He coached for 3 seasons at Western Kentucky University on the staff of Jack Harbaugh. So he coached for 3 years there with Jack Harbaugh. So their dad, John and Jim Harbaugh's dad, he already coached with them. So he goes back so far. He has been in coaching for a long, long time. So 1986, basically he was there. He was there as a defensive coordinator at Defiance, Notre Dame assistant, 94 to 95, Cincinnati, 96 to 98, Western Illinois, 99 as defensive coordinator, linebacker coach, and then Western Kentucky in 2000 to 2003 as a defensive coordinator, inside linebacker coach, and then took that leap to the NFL, became a linebacker coach for the Raiders, Denver Broncos. He was a linebacker coach for the Raiders for 2004 to 2008, Broncos, 2009 as linebacker coach, defensive coordinator for the Broncos for 2010 for only 1 year. And then once again, the connection comes back again with the Harbaughs, where he came back to the Ravens, or got hired by the Ravens as a linebacker coach from 2012 to 2017, and then became the defensive coordinator from 2018 to 2021. Wow. So he has been there with his Jim and John Harbaugh's dad, coaching with him back at Western Kentucky in 2000, 2003, to now I'm going to coach for your son, John Harbaugh, with the Ravens. There's a lot of connections there. There is that possibility. He is a free agent to be able to go anywhere he wants to now. He could fit with Jim Harbaugh if he can't get Jesse Minter. I would assume that Jim Harbaugh wants Jesse Minter there because he's his guy. He won a national championship with him. He wants continuity. He wants that guy that knows the system and how he wants to coach. That makes a ton of sense. And then most recently with Wink, he was basically obviously the Giants coordinator for 2022 to 2023. Makes sense. On top of that, he was a Super Bowl champion with the Baltimore Ravens as a coach. So either way, that's one of those guys that could easily come in as a defensive coordinator and bring a very, very good, strong defense all around. So, but basically what we got here, guys, these are my guys that I'm just putting as potential guys and how you might be able to piece them together as defensive coordinators for the Chargers. They got connections: Jim Harbaugh, Belichick, even to say some of the coordinators like Derek Ainsley and GIF Smith. Those are guys that actually fit really, really well for if we want to keep somebody in-house as a head coach. That's kind of how I've always pieced these things together. And these are guys that I'm looking at, but I would be interested to know what your guys' thoughts are. Any of other contacts, or any other defensive coordinators out there that actually might be a good fit for our next defensive coordinator for the Chargers. So once again, guys, like this video, subscribe to this channel. Love to be able to hear from you guys. Throw some comments in below. Once again, James from Bolt Bros. Let's go.